Okay, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. So inshallah, today we will keep discussing Al-Quddus, the name of the Most Holy. We had a chance to discuss in the past week with Brother Harun and Brother Jazmi about the first few pieces where we discussed how how the name of the Most Holy Al-Quddus is manifested on the earth and in the universe in the form of cleanliness, in the form of everything being in order and harmony, but also like some specific emphasis on how clean, orderly, and without the filth and debris the whole universe is working. I mean, there were examples, and I'll skim over some of those today. Examples from all the way from our white blood corpuscles, right, to our defense mechanism in our bodies, to the stars and the shooting stars and how they are cleaned in the atmosphere before, entering to our, and making its way down to Earth. And of course, everything from eagles collecting the vultures collecting the dead bodies of the animals to worms and animals. So there's all this cleanliness and the action of this name of Al-Quddus, the Most Holy Being, manifested on the earth. And today, inshallah, we will talk over that a little bit because we also have different speakers this week with Kolnabe and Fatabi. So I'll have their opinions on it as well. But inshallah, I would like to also focus on this part where how this name of Al-Quddus, the Most Holy, actually um, points to the oneness of the Creator, oneness of God. And inshallah, we'll try to cover some ground in that piece, which is covered towards the end of this piece that we are reading. So just to remind all is that we are reading the first part of the 30th Flash of the Risale-i Nur Collection, and this is about six major names of God, divine names. For some scholars, these are accepted as the Ism al-Azam, including Imam Ali, radiallahu anh, that Fardun Hayyun, Qayyumun, Hakamun, Adlun, Quddus, right? There's six names. Fard, or single one. Hakam, the sapient or wise. Quddus, the most holy, the most perfect. High, the all living, ever living. And these names. So inshallah, again, this week though we are inshallah, I think this can finalize this name of Al-Quddus, and we will inshallah next week continue with the Al-Adl, the all just, inshallah. Our speakers, inshallah, Colin Turner from UK, Fatah Lefer from Philly, Philadelphia, USA, and myself, Mustafa, joining you guys from Boston. All right. So this is the ayah that starts or that is related to this piece with the name of Al-Quddus. Shall I read this? I'll skip a few pages, I think, so that I can have time to read some of the later ones. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَالْأَرْضَ فَرَشْنَاهَا فَنِعْمَ الْمَاهِدُونَ. And the earth we have spread wide, and how well have we ordered it? Maybe I'll read quickly first few pieces because again, we have new speakers and I would like to hear their thoughts as well. One manifestation of the divine name of Most Holy, which is Al-Quddus, which is one meaning of the above verse and is the greatest name or one of the six lies contained in the greatest name, became clear to me in the month of Shaban in Eskişehir prison. It demonstrated with complete clarity both the divine existence and divine unity. I saw it as follows. The universe is a vast, constantly working factory, and the globe of the earth, a hostel and guest house which is continually filled and emptied. Generally, factories, hostels, and guest houses which are thus used become much dirtied and soiled with filth, debris, and rubbish, and putrid matter accumulates in all parts of them. They cannot be occupied unless they are kept with care and cleaned and swept. Human beings are overwhelmed by the dirt. The factory of the universe and guest house of the earth, however, are totally pure, clean, and spotless, and completely unsoiled, untainted, and fresh. There is nothing unnecessary, nothing without benefit, not a random piece of dirt to be found. Even if there is apparently, it is quickly thrown into a transformation machine and cleaned. This means that the one who looks after this factory does so very well. Its owner is such that he sweeps and cleans and orders the vast factory and extensive palace as though they were small rooms. Considering the size of the huge factory, there is no dirt or rubbish remaining from its filth and debris. Indeed, its cleanliness and tidiness are remarkable. If someone does not wash himself and clean his small room for a month, they will become extremely dirty and soiled. That is to say, the cleanliness, purity, and luminosity in this palace of the world arise from a continuous, wise, and diligent cleaning. If it were not for this cleaning, sweeping, and careful tending, in 1 year, all the 100,000 animal species would have been choked on the face of the earth. Also, the debris of the globes in space and the heavens, which manifest life and death, and of satellites and stars, would have smashed not only our heads and those of the other animals, but also the head of the earth itself and of our world. They would have rained down on our heads rocks the size of mountains and driven us away from our homeland in this world. However, for a long time past, if as a warning a few meteorites have fallen as a result of destruction and reconstruction on those lofty worlds, they have not broken any heads. Furthermore, the corpses of 100,000 animal species and the debris of 200,000 plant species each year on the face of the earth, resulting from the alternation and struggles of life and death, would have so utterly filthied the land and the sea that conscious creatures, rather than loving and delighting in the face of the earth, would have felt disgust and aversion at such ugliness and fled to death and non-existence. Just as a bird cleans its wings with ease and ascribes his pages, so too the wings of the aircraft of the earth and the birds of the heavenly bodies and the pages of the book of the universe are cleaned and made beautiful. So much so that people who do not consider the infinite beauty of the hereafter and think with belief become lovers of this cleanliness and beauty of the world, they worship it. That is to say, this palace of the world and factory of the universe display a greatest manifestation of the divine name of Most Holy Al-Quddus, whereby it is not only the carnivorous cleaners of the seas and the eagles of the land which obey the commands proceeding from that sacred cleansing, but also its cleansing officials which gather up corpses like worms and ants. Like the red and white blood corpuscles flowing in the body, obey those sacred commands and do the cleaning in the body's cells, so does breathing purify and clean the blood. And as eyelids obey the command to clean the eye and flies to brush their wings, so the extensive atmosphere and the clouds obey it. The air blows upon the pieces of dust and soil settled on the surface of the earth and cleans it. The sponges of the clouds sprinkle water on the garden of the earth and dampen the dust and soil. Then, so as not to dirty the sky, the air quickly collects the earth's rubbish and withdraws and hides itself with perfect orderliness. It displays the beautiful face and eye of the skies as swept and polished, all sparkling and shining. And as the stars, elements, minerals, and plants obey the command to clean, all particles and atoms obey it. They pay attention to cleanliness within the astonishing upheavals of change and transformation. They never congregate anywhere unnecessarily and get in the way. If they do become soiled, they are quickly cleaned. They are impelled by a hand of wisdom to acquire the cleanest, neatest, and most shining states and the most beautiful, pure, and subtle forms. Thus, this single act that is making clean, which is a single truth, is the greatest manifestation of the greatest name. The name of Most Holy, Al-Quddus, which shows itself in the maximum sphere that is throughout the universe. Like the sun, it shows directly to eyes that are far-seeing and broad-sighted the divine existence and unity together with the most beautiful divine names. So I'll pause here for some time so that again we did cover some of this with some of our speakers last couple of weeks, but I would like to really hear because there are these great examples given, and we tried to in the past weeks we tried to connect like the translation of the name of Most Holy, for example, which we kind of conclude that is a bit not sufficient, insufficient to convey the meaning of the name Al-Quddus. Um, but we had some also audiences in the past week pointing out that some of the other descriptions or translations or explanations of the name Al-Quddus is usually around God's greatness, God's perfectness, God's being in the holy state, but that this is a different approach. I mean, it's something that also shows like the manifestation of this name on the universe. So these were there were these comments. So I would like to actually get both Colin Abi's and Fatih Abi's ideas on like these examples about like cleanliness and the name of Al-Quddus, how it is manifested on the earth. Colin Hocam, would you like to start?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I wasn't here last week, so I don't have the benefit of the of having heard the wise and no doubt very incisive input of the speakers from last week. So I apologize.
Okay.
It seems to me from the comments that I've been reading during the week that there is a problem maybe with the translation of Quddus into the word holy, which itself has connotations which may be sometimes misleading. And from the actual text, there seems to be a lot of emphasis on notions of purity,
Yes.
and particularly on notions of physical purity and physical impurity,
Yeah.
which is, I think, to a certain extent problematic. It's understandable why Ustad talks in metaphor and he talks in symbol. We have to understand that physical impurity is one way of allowing us to understand the notion of impurity in the abstract sense. And I think it would help us maybe if we look at the taxonomy of divine names and try to understand what kind of name is Al-Quddus, where it actually comes from. And as we know, everything which exists in creation comes into existence through the manifestation of the divine attributes, the divine names in all of their infinitely varied degrees. So they come together, and this is why we can see things which are other than God. In other words, the creation, the cosmos. But of course, we know this is not the whole story, because it's this distinction between two particular groups of names which sits at the very heart of the diversity that we can see in the cosmos. And of course, it's through diversity that we're able to see unity. In other words, it's through diversity that we're able to understand the existence of God. And as Said Nursi himself says, the creator of the universe has two kinds of names: those which pertain to his glory, to his jalal, and those which pertain to his beauty, his jamal. And as Ustad says, it's required that these names demonstrate their decrees, their awamir, through different manifestations. And because of this, the Creator blends together apparent opposites in the universe. So purity, impurity, light, dark, good, bad, he brings them face to face. He gives them aggressive and defensive positions in the form of a kind of wise and beneficial musabaqa or contest. So he makes the opposites transgress one another's bounds. And he brings conflict and change into being, and he makes the universe subject to various laws of change and transformation. And this enables progress and advancement. And as he says himself, in humankind, which is the comprehensive fruit of the tree of creation, he makes this law of musabaqa, this law of creation, in an even stranger form. He opens the door to striving, which is the means of all human progress. And he gives Satan's party, Hezbollah Shaitan, certain faculties with which Shaitan is able to challenge Hezbollah, the party of God. So what I'm talking about here is there is a necessity for diversity in creation, and diversity is characterized by the apparent contest between complementary opposites. Purity and impurity are one of those opposites. Now, we've talked before about the relationship between the Jamali names and the Jalali names, and how these are connected to the notion of Tashbih and Tanzih. So it's enough to say here that all of the apparent opposites which we witness in creation, such as darkness and light, benefit and harm, praiseworthiness and blameworthiness, purity and impurity, and so on, are made possible only by the interplay of these two groups of attributes, the Jalali attributes and the Jamali attributes. And we know that the Jalali attributes are usually associated with God's incomparability, his tanzih. Incomparability means it's very, very difficult to understand the attributes because they are largely attributes which are negatives. On the other hand, the Jamali attributes are closely connected with God's similarity. So from one perspective, God is held to be incomparable with anything that exists. So we say that God is not like this, not like that, not in time, not in place, not in any way like any human being or indeed any other thing. So these are kind of negative descriptions. So God, from this perspective, is ontologically above the cosmos, which is just a shadow or reflection, which has no real existence of its own. So from the point of view of divine incomparability, tanzih, God is and will always be completely inaccessible to his creatures, and he can never be known as he really is in and of himself. So as far as the tanzih is concerned, and I believe that Quddus is a name of tanzih, a name of incomparability, God is the God of what is called in English apophatic theology, which is basically negative theology. But as certain scholars have remarked, and as we can understand, such an entity cannot be a God whom one is able to love and worship, because if God is incomparable, and if God is unable to be known, if God is too remote and incomprehensible, how can we love him, know him, and worship him? So it's in order to enable us as human beings to attain the love and worship of God that the Quran does not confine itself in its description of God to these negative, negatory attributes or qualities which describe God's inaccessibility. It also mentions numerous positive attributes which act as a kind of a counterbalance to divine incomparability. And they are the attributes of tashbih, which highlight divine similarity, which is tashbih. So while God is described as having qualities such as distance, as grandeur, as sublimity, and indeed as holiness, qudusiya, all of which are connected with that aspect of God which is difficult, if not impossible for us to fathom, God is also described as having qualities which we're able to understand much more easily for the simple reason that they're qualities that we're familiar with, such as beauty, compassion, love, nearness, forgiveness, and so on. And I think, and I know this has been a very lengthy introduction, but I thought we needed to contextualize it. I think that we have to understand Quddus um, first and foremost as an attribute of tanzi, an attribute of incomparability. And we shouldn't understand it in the first instance as being an attribute which describes physical impurity. And this is what Said Nursi does. He describes lots of instances of like physical impurity. He talks about how creation, you never see any dirt or excess or grime or anything wasteful in creation. He says when you look at the oceans, you don't see dirt or any sort of dross or anything which is displeasing to the eye. He talks in terms of physical impurity. Now, this is the way that Said Nursi wants to introduce us to the notion of abstract impurity and abstract purity, these notions which are abstract. In order to understand abstract purity and abstract impurity, we have to understand it first by going through this, how we can say, this condescension, this linguistic condescension, where Quddus is talked about as though it's talking about physical purity. It's not really to do with physical purity. Quddus is talking about that aspect of God which is unfathomable ultimately, but which is understandable only if we describe it in terms of purity, impurity, and impurity in the physical sense. Now, I don't know whether that makes sense.
I can try to
Maybe you could
summarize.
try to reframe it and
No,
re-summarize it.
summarize it so that you can tell if I understood it. At least the last piece is that like as a name, as an attribute of the divine, right? The name of Al-Quddus, we can translate it again as the most holy, the most pure, but it is, we cannot really think of it as a physical purity or impurity because, again, as you said, the tanzih is a name that actually distances God's existence from our own. I mean, in the sense that he's much above, and that it's not fathomable. It's not, we cannot really comprehend his existence or the nature of this name of most holy, being the most
Yes,
pure.
yes,
Uh, but in a way, for us to understand this, God actually manifests purity in this world in a physical sense as well. And I think this is
absolutely.
also a manifestation of this name, so that we understand through the physical purity that is so pervasive around us, we can point to the fact that we can hopefully um, go to the fact that in that abstract sense, in that non-physical sense, God is the most pure. He's above everything. He's the most holy. But this is like a connection. This is just like a
A correspondence.
manifestation, yeah, a
Yes.
correspondence, a physical manifestation of this name for us to understand this better. And this is how, I guess, Said Nursi is trying to make this connection for us to, I guess, grasp that more easily.
Subhanallah, I couldn't have put it better than you've just put it now.
Alhamdulillah, thanks. I mean, it's good that I was able to at
At
least
least, at least I, at
explain.
least you understood it, Alhamdulillah, and you put it in a much more easy to understand way than I did. You know, these correspondences exist for in order for us to understand something about Allah, which normally wouldn't be understandable. And you just mentioned another one. You mentioned above. When we say that God is above
Mm,
human beings, um, we can only understand what above means if we understand it in a physical sense, which is why Allah creates time and space, distance, and above and below. So there is above and below physically. But, when we say that Allah is above human beings, we don't mean that he's physically above. But the very fact that we can understand what above means, and we can only understand it through our sensory perception. So when we understand that there is a physical above, when we say that the sun is above my head, or the cherry tree, the highest cherries are above my hands and I can't reach them. When we talk about above and below, we understand something, we can understand something of the abstract sense of what above means. Being out of reach from the point of view of beauty, being out of reach from the point of view of perfection. So Allah shows us what above is, the abstract word above, by showing us what physicality is, by showing what above is in the physical realm. Otherwise, how can we understand it? Allah, the miracle of kalam, the miracle of Allah's discourse with us, is that he is able to make us understand the abstract through the physical and through the mundane. And this is only something that a miraculous creator like Allah could do. He makes us understand the abstract through the mundane and through the physical. So by showing us what above is, physical aboveness, he makes us understand what abstract aboveness is. And he does the very same with Quddus.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. This is really helpful. Jazakallah khairan. And there were,
Thank you for your wonderful restatement of my rather confused explanation at the beginning.
you had to give that initial introduction to set the context. So I was like, a consumer of the readily given thing there. And there were a couple comments that practically confirms and praises these things from both Harun Abi and Mehmet Abi. Eh, and we can cover them. Like I'll read through it so that it's on the record. Harun Abi says, wonderful introduction to a general template to approach the names of Allah. And I agree, because we hadn't really discussed this Jalali names and Jamali names and things like that either in the past sessions. So I think it was really useful. Brother Mehmet mentions that, so we are created to show God's incomparable features, names, and attributes. We are ajiz, we are impoverished, powerless assets who are incomplete showings or showcases of God's greatness.
Mashallah, mashallah. That's a wonderful, wonderful explanation.
He also says we are coming from God and we are about to return to God. Right now we are in a destination of consistent transformation of ilim and kudrat asmas. So again, the how and this is something that we can probably discuss in these series, because this will, again, we started with Al-Quddus, the name of Most Holy, but we will continue inshallah with the other names. We inshallah to cover 6 names at least, and inshallah as we see the manifestation of these names, people might start to think about, like, these names are everywhere, right? So we are always showing, always being around and being in receiving end or showing end of these names, and how pervasive again these names are. So again, that statement I think is a great one as well. I would like to turn to Brother Fatih and get his opinion both on this, this introduction that we had about understanding the abstract meaning of the Al-Quddus through the physical physical manifestation. And any thoughts about that, or in general, if the name of Al-Quddus and how it is manifested around us? Fatih abi?
Just to add to Colin Abi's point about Quddus being about Tanzih, there is a sentence in 9th word. I'd like to read it in Turkish first, because in English translation, it's hard to make that connection. He is explaining the salat, daily prayers. Yani celaline karşı kavlen ve fiilen Subhanallah deyip takdis etmek. I mean, by saying Subhanallah in salat, we are making the takdis, which is affirming that he is the one who is Quddus. And Subhanallah has that meaning of tanzih. It's very comprehensive meaning of tanzih. And another point I'd like to make is at the start of the this part, he starts with the verse وَالْأَرْضَ فَرَشْنَاهَا فَنِعْمَ الْمَاهِدُونَ, and the earth we have spread wide, and how well we have ordered it. What I understand, I mean, we're gonna read this meaning actually in coming sentences, but just to I just want to make a couple of points. Quddus means Quddus's meaning. It means that it does not have any deficiency, defect, or anything useless. The part of being, I mean, clean in our daily understanding, in terms of not having dirt, is only one part of it. Its meaning it's gonna come, I think, for example, the balance in the universe, the orderliness in the universe, they all come from the name Quddus. And we're gonna read actually in the name All Just, Adl, we're gonna study the same concepts too, about the balance, orderliness.
Yeah, makes real sense. Yes, I mean, it is indeed one meaning, right? I guess to connect those two, it is one meaning, both to make us understand the non-physical attribute, but as you said, it's not only purity but also orderliness and the balance that is kept. Yeah.
And so right before these discussions started 2 weeks ago, I believe, right? Like a couple of weeks ago, I watched a documentary about fungi and mushrooms. I mean, it's amazing. I'm seeing everything I saw in that documentary on this. Like most of the things that we see as dirt around us is a sustenance or food for other species like fungi or bacteria.
MashaAllah.
Yeah. And in the one of the, I guess last week was like one brother commented that the way of cleanliness, when we think about like cleaning things, we are usually in the human sense, we change the place of the dirt to like outside or somewhere else, right? We just transfer the dirt, right? From we vacuum it and we like throw it away somewhere else. We just make someone else's problem. But in the universe, it's actually it's transformed, right? It's recycled to a place, the situation where it is actually transformed into something useful and something that makes sense. I guess Brother Ali has a comment. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Only
Thanks,
the meaning of Subhanallah I'd like to add to Fatih brother's statements.
Sure.
He indicated, but from the second point of 9th word, I'd like to read a very short sentence or the part of sentence. And I'd like to ask a question. Glory be to Allah subhanallah proclaims that the sustainer of all worlds is pure and free of all defects and exalted above and far from the false ideas of the people of misguidance, and hallowed and exempt from all the faults in the universe. I wanted to share these meanings, this description, and I'd like to ask a question. The question is this: what does, in this context or in this sentence, the faults in the universe mean? He is exempt from all the faults in the universe mean. What does it mean? Because the universe is also, as a creation, perfect. Here, it is mentioned of the faults in the universe. If it is related to the topic we are discussing, we can say something. Yes.
I think it's a language issue there. It doesn't mean that there are faults in the universe. It means he is exempt from any fault. So any fault that can be imagined or conjectured by someone, he is exempt from that. It doesn't mean that there are actual faults. But if someone wants to conjecture a particular fault or postulate something which can be seen as a fault, then he is exempt from it. And it can be shown and proven that he is exempt and exonerated from that. So I think that is just a linguistic thing.
I just want to read one sentence from Ismail. I mean, one of the oncoming topics. Maybe it might be related to what Ali Abid asked or told. So long as man's dirty hand does not interfere, there is no true uncleanliness or ugliness in anything. I mean, I don't know if it is related to what Brother Ali asked. We see some effects of human beings not taking care of the universe right now. I mean, with this climate change or like environmental disasters that we are seeing around us. It's mostly because of human beings excess use of things, resources.
Those are great explanations. Adabi, any insights?
Sorry, can it be that the faults in the universe indicates that the universe, all creatures are sleeping, are eating, they are impotent, as in that way the creatures are the mirrors of manifestations of the names of Allah also. For example, by dying, the universe is proclaiming the name of Beka, for example, to die, to sleep, to eat. These kinds of faults in the universe, can it be?
Or we could call them maybe deficiencies, right? I mean, those. I mean, and again, that could go into a linguistic thing, but I mean, like sleeping or like the having to eat could be seen as a deficiency or like a weakness, right? Like, because everybody, all the creatures, I guess, in the universe, they are weak because they need countless things, especially human beings. We need countless things, so we are infinitely weak and deficient. So I don't know, we can
Could I give an example which may help?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's to do with fungi, because I once watched a documentary about mushrooms, and it showed this mushroom, when it doesn't produce eggs, it produces spores, and it produces over 1 billion spores, right? Such as, when mammals produce sperm, mushrooms produce spores. And the commentator of the documentary was saying, we will never be able to understand why there is so much waste, because for the commentator, producing 1 billion spores and then the possibility of only 1 or 2 mushrooms actually coming into existence from those spores, he saw that as waste. But the fact is that those spores are created by their creator for purposes which their wise creator and their wise creator only knows. So just because we are unable to understand the wise purpose behind the production of 1 billion spores, it doesn't mean that they are wasteful or that they are pointless. So this would be seen as a fault. But of course, it's a fault only in the vision of the commentator.
Yeah. Jazakallah. Thanks. Great. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks for the great question and great responses. And yeah, I mean, this I think added additional aspect to the name of Al-Quddus, and again helps us connect it to like the Subhanallah, right? How we do dhikr, how we proclaim Allah's holiness, and this making this connection, and also again how the universe is showing His holiness by its own defects, perceived defects, right, as well as all the cleanliness and everything. So there, I guess, maybe we can understand this as a way that in multiple ways the beings show that Allah is the perfect one. He's the one that is most holy, either being clean, but also when they are seen as not seen as faulty, they still have purposes and wisdoms that again that still doesn't pertain, or they don't these are false in the ostensibly, in the outside they might be seen as false, but they're actually not, and still points to the purity and holiness of God. And so from these two perspectives, I think it gave quite a few ways to approach the thing. So I would like to read a comment from Brother Harun, and then I'll inshallah go to the next section. He says, I want to re-emphasize the starting point of Said Nursi for the name Al-Quddus. The starting verse attracts our attention to the organization of the universe, particularly the world. Particles, massive bodies are subdued to the commanders so that we observe everything in the right place. That is the elaborated meaning of Al-Quddus in this treatise. The location of this treatise is being addendum to the addendum of 30th word about particles, the Zarra, Risale, and the addendum of 30th word is the name Qayyum. So after the Zarra, Qayyum, and this is, I guess, in the beginning of this Risale, it says, this is the addendum to this Al-Qayyum, sustaining everything, and the meaning, I guess, rough meaning of that name is sustaining everything continuously. So inshallah, this is also a good reminder of us, is that the names are connected, and the name of Al-Qayyum and the name of Al-Quddus are related in a special way, I think, through this connection that Brother Harun makes as well. And Brother Mehmet comments that it's so similar to the speech between Allah and angels, and God says, you don't know, but I know the wisdoms that you don't know. It is better for us not to question Allah. Allah has wisdoms that we don't know. May Allah help us understand the wisdoms. Amen. So,
yeah. Brother, can you go to the verse which starts off this? Because Brother Fatih in his discourse was talking about Quddus being connected to this verse. In the verse, it talks about al-ard, the earth. And if we understand as-samawat wal-ard, there are different samawats, but there is only one ard. And this ard here we can understand as corporeality or physicality. In other words, the physical universe. Those physical things which are brought together and which are made amenable to our sensory perception. And so the ard really is the physical universe. And this also fits in with what Harun is saying about the physical universe is how well we have ordered it. How well we have ordered it. In other words, the Quddusiyah is obvious from it. And we've spread this earth wide and we've ordered it well. And the Qayyumiyah, which Brother Harun also brings in, it shows that the universe is characterized by constant ordering and constant wise ordering. So this Qayyumiyah and this Quddusiyah are inextricably linked, and they are constant and they are enduring. And I think, you know, the different inputs that we've had tonight have really, for me, given the word Quddus a completely new coat of paint, if you wish. It's wonderful. Alhamdulillah.
No, that's great. Yeah, and this is the great part of these discussions. It teaches all of us new aspects through different ways to approach the question and different ways connections that we establish. Alhamdulillah. And Brother Mehmet in his comment confirms that Earth being the heart of cosmos, according to Risale-i Nur. So, and that is, I guess, all is connected. So I would like, we have about like 10 minutes left. I really would like to read this last part and have comments on this connection of Al-Quddus to the divine oneness, because there are a couple examples there. And inshallah, I would like to, so I would like to read that piece. Oh, if I can. Okay, yes. So I'll read from this page, inshallah. It has been established with decisive proofs in many parts of the Risale-i Nur that the act of ordering and order, which are a manifestation of the names of Sapient, Al-Hakam, and All-Wise, Hakim, and the act of weighing and balance, which are a manifestation of the names of Justice and All-Just, Adil and Adl, Al-Adl, and the act of adorning and munificence, which are a manifestation of the names of Beauteous, Jamil, and all generous, Kerim, and the act of sustaining and bestowal, which are a manifestation of the names of Sustainer, Razak, and Most Compassionate, Rahim, are each a single truth and a single act. They therefore demonstrate the necessary existence and unity of a single being. In exactly the same way, the act of purifying and making clean, which is a manifestation and display of the name of Most Holy Al-Quddus, demonstrates like the sun both the existence of the necessarily existent one and like daylight his unity. And as the wise acts of ordering, balancing, adorning, and making clean mentioned above point to a single maker by reason of their unity of kind in the maximum sphere, so most of the beautiful names, indeed the 1001 names, each have such a greatest manifestation in the maximum sphere. And the act proceeding from that manifestation points to the single, unique one, Ahad, with clarity and decisiveness in relation to its extensiveness. The self-evident truths and single acts that illuminate the face of the universe and make it smile, such as the universal wisdom that causes all things to conform to its law and order, the comprehensive munificence that adorns all things and causes them to smile, the all-embracing mercy that makes all things pleased and happy, the universal providing and sustenance which nurtures and gives pleasure to all things, and the life and giving of life, which connects each thing with all things and makes each thing benefit from and to some extent own all things. These self-evident truths and single acts point as plainly as light points to the sun, to a single, all-wise, all-generous, and all-compassionate one, a single sustainer, a single ever-living giver of life. If those hundreds of extensive acts, each of which is a clear proof of God's unity, are not attributed to the single unique one, each necessarily becomes impossible in hundreds of respects. For example, let alone such self-evident truths and single evidences as wisdom, providence, mercy, sustaining, and giving of life, if only the act of making clean is not attributed to the creator of the universe, then the following becomes necessary in the unbelieving way of the people of misguidance. Either all the creatures connected to cleansing from particles and flies to the elements and the stars would have to have the ability to know and consider the adorning, balancing, and cleansing of the vast universe and would act accordingly, or each would have to possess the sacred attributes of the world's creator, or each would have to be present at a consultative meeting the size of the universe in order to regulate the equilibrium of the adorning and cleansing of the universe and its incomings and outgoings, and innumerable particles, flies, and stars would have to be participants in the meeting, and so on. Hundreds of superstitious, nonsensical, and sophistical impossibilities like these would have to occur so that the universal, comprehensive, and exalted adorning, purifying, and cleansing that is to be seen and observed everywhere could come about. As for this, it is not impossible once, but 100,000 times over. If daylight and imaginary miniature suns represented in the shining objects on the earth are not attributed to the sun and they are not said to be the manifestation of the sun's reflection, it would be necessary for the actual sun to be present in all fragments of glass, drops of water, and snowflakes glistening on the face of the earth, and even in all particles of air, so that the universal light could exist. Thus, wisdom is a light, all-embracing mercy is a light, adorning, balancing, ordering, and cleansing are each an encompassing light. They are all the rays of the pre-eternal sun. So see how misguidance and unbelief have entered a bog from which there is no escape. See just how idiotic is the ignorance of misguidance. Say, praise be to God for the religion of Islam and complete and perfect belief. For sure, this exalted universal cleansing which keeps the palace of the universe clean is the manifestation and requirement of the divine name of Most Holy. Yes, just as the glorification of all creatures looks to the name of Most Holy, so does the name of Most Holy Quddus require their cleanliness. We must not forget that bad qualities, false beliefs, sins and innovation bid'ah are all instances of moral and spiritual dirt. It is because of this sacred connection of cleanliness that the hadith and nadafati min al-iman, cleanliness is a part of belief, deems it to be a light of belief. And the verse, Inna Allah yuhibbu at-tawwabin wa yuhibbu al-mutatahhirin. Indeed, God loves those who turn to Him constantly, and He loves those who keep themselves pure and clean, shows that cleanliness is a means of attracting God's love.
MashaAllah.
Um, so I think one, I guess, question, like we kind of switch gears a little bit, right? Like how this shows the oneness of Allah, right? And there is this example, I think the sun reflecting in everything, and if again those things are not or those glistening lights are not from the sun, it has to be, there needs to be a source of light like a sun in each object. I think there's a universal act and this connection of this universal act to the one creator. So maybe from that perspective, and I guess connecting that to our actions, right? Like, and like the cleanliness as a part of religion and stuff. Um, can I have the comments from our speakers? Maybe Kulnabi, starting from you again.
I can't say anything better than what you've just said, than the reading that you've just given and the result that you've just concluded. That cleanliness, obviously, the whole notion of Allah's Qudusiyah is shown to us in physical, corporeal forms. We shouldn't limit our understanding to that, but also we should understand that, there is a performative aspect to our belief, and that when we are nazif and clean and pure in the physical sense, in the corporeal sense, this we have to understand that what we are trying to project, and what we're trying to show and manifest, is the exoneration of Allah from any kind of fault, and also the glorification of Allah as one who has no deficit, has no flaw, and has no lack. So, we can understand that cleanliness, and in English they say cleanliness is next to godliness, and being nazif and being mutahhar is part of our iman. But there is an underlying truth which we have to bear in mind, that is what we are working towards, and that physical manifestations of cleanliness basically are there for us to understand the spiritual basis of our Islam, which is understanding Allah as totally pure and totally exonerated from any kind of fault or lack.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. Thank you. Brother Fatih?
And the last part you read gives an excellent explanation for why the name Al-Quddus is considered one of the greatest names. One, because the name Al-Quddus relates to the everything, the whole universe, and the second is it is related to all manifestations of all the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, 1001 names, or you can make it more, but that's the reason it is considered one of the greatest names.
We have a question, and maybe as a physicist, Brother Fatih can answer this, is that can we consider the black hole is part of Allah's Al-Quddus manifestation? It's part of balancing the equilibrium through exterminating universe's residual or residues.
Yeah, we can understand it.
It's like a vacuum, right?
Yeah, vacuum.
If there is a black hole.
Yeah, that's a different story, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. There is one relatively lengthy comment from Brother Nabi. I would like to read quickly through it, so that again it's on the record. And inshallah, if there are comments about that, we can take them. Otherwise, we can end. The purposes for the existence and the results of the lives of all things relate to the following three categories. Again, this is from the 10th verse, 6th truth. The first and the most exalted pertains to the Creator. It consists of presenting to the gaze of the pre-eternal witness the bejeweled and miraculous wonders he has affixed to the object in question, as if in a military parade. To live for a fleeting second is enough to attain that glance. Indeed, the potentiality and intent for existence is enough, without ever emerging into life. Even, I guess, those spores could be an example here. This purpose is fully realized, for example, by delicate creatures that vanish swiftly, and by seeds and kernels, each a work of art that never come to life, that is, never bear a fruit or flower. They all remain untouched by vanity and purposelessness. Thus, the first purpose of all things is to proclaim, by means of their life and existence, the miracles of power and the traces of artistry of the Maker, and display them to the gaze of the glorious monarch. Jazakallah khair. Yeah, it is indeed. Nothing is purposeless in this world, and inshallah, may Allah help us understand the meanings and manifestations of these names. Any final thoughts? We are a few minutes over. If not, I would like to get dua from Brother Fatih.
No, just a wonderful session. Thank you so much to everyone.
I think so. And I would like to remind again, if you are watching this from the YouTube, if you would like to join on Zoom, please feel free to register here at lh4h.org/register. If you're on Zoom and if you didn't catch everything and would like to catch the previous previous discussions, again, we have a channel at YouTube, Lighthouse 4H. Feel free to follow us there too. Brother Fatih, would you like to end with a dua, inshallah? Or any final comments?
No, I mean, it was a wonderful discussion.
Thank you. Maybe you can end with a small dua for all of us.
سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. Oh Allah, make us understand these names and live the meanings of those names with our lives. Amen.
Amen.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you all, and inshallah, again, this was the end of the name of Al-Quddus, you know, and we will next week continue with the other name of Allah, Al-Adl, inshallah, the all just.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Look forward to it.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Alaikum salam. And thank you for your moderation. It was wonderful.
Jazakallah. Thanks.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.